Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the fundraising session in the M&H Summer Series, Making Sense of New Opportunities. We have 4 speakers in this session from museums all over the UK to discuss the work they've done over the past year in terms of innovative fundraising. And I know there are people on this call that have been on other ones already. As I say every call, I'm really sorry, but for the housekeeping, please keep your mic off while everyone else is speaking. And if you have any questions, pop them in the chat along with your name and organisation, and we will go through them in the Q&A at the end. So in the interest of time, seeing as we have 4 speakers today, I'm going to pass over to Barry, who's going to kick things off. Barry.
Thanks very much, David. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me just check I can share my screen. There we go. Does that come up okay? David, can you see that? Yep, cool. Well, my name is Barry Ferguson. I'm Director of Philanthropy and Partnerships at V&A Dundee, but I've been invited along today to speak specifically about the Dundee Cultural Recovery Fund. So the impact of COVID-19 and subsequent lockdown have obviously presented a huge challenge to our sector. So we decided to do something slightly different during lockdown. And Dundee's 5 major independent cultural bodies, so V&A Dundee, Dundee Contemporary Arts, Dundee Heritage Trust, which runs RRS Discovery that you can see beside V&A Dundee in the picture there, and Verdant Works, which is a sort of Scottish jute museum, so covering industrial heritage essentially. Dundee Rep and Scottish Dance Theatre, which is one organisation, and Dundee Science Centre. So the 5 organisations were facing a collective deficit in the 2021 financial year of more than 4 million through the loss of visitors, trading, commercial activity. And it was really difficult to see how we were going to do any active fundraising, any philanthropy. People sort of went to ground, and it was quite difficult to see how we were going to get through that. So to address the situation, we got together and launched Dundee Cultural Recovery Fund. We think it's the only example in the UK of 5 cultural organisations coming together to run a joint fundraising campaign. But I'm more than happy to be proved wrong on that one. And if there are other examples, please let us know, because at the moment we're going around and saying we're unique, and we might well not be. But the campaign was aimed at ensuring that we could recover successfully. All 5 organisations are charities. We rely heavily on the support of individuals, trusts, foundations and corporate partners. And the campaign aimed to help reverse the loss of momentum that the pandemic caused, and to help us return to a sound financial footing and allow us to play our part in the recovery of the city. Cultural organisations in Dundee are hugely important. I won't go into huge amounts of detail about Dundee as a post-industrial city with problems in terms of deprivation and everything else. But if anyone's interested in knowing more about that, then please get in touch with me. But the cultural organisations are really important. They make Dundee a great place to live and work, and are pivotal in terms of regeneration strategy, driving tourism and economic development. Many jobs depend on us directly and indirectly, and they really benefit the health of the local economy. They've also helped to establish Dundee as the UK's only UNESCO City of Design, and we think that we punch pretty well above our population size and resource base. Dundee attracts over 1 million tourism visits per annum, with a tourism spend of around 187 million. And since V&A Dundee opened in September 2018, we had well over 1 million visits in our first 500 days of opening. So culture is seen as the kind of bedrock of the urban regeneration that's going on. But you're all really here to hear about the Cultural Recovery Fund itself. And I'll just make a few comments about this. Try and go on to the next slide. There we go. Just some info about what was involved. So essentially we set ourselves a target of £1 million, and the Northwood Charitable Trust, which is the family charitable giving arm of DC Thomson, and throughout the UK, most of you will know DC Thomson as the publisher of the Beano and the Dundee and things like that, but they're a huge publishing organisation. They own lots of local and regional newspapers, have diversified into radio and other media, but they are based in the city of Dundee and are hugely supportive of V&A Dundee and all of the other cultural organisations that exist in the city. And we're also hoping to have a new Eden project develop in Dundee, and again, Northwood Charitable Trust are heavily involved in that. So they provided tremendous civic leadership in offering up 500k as a challenge fund, which meant that we then had to go out and raise another 500k. Now, we decided to do that focusing on donors that were already known to us. So we didn't have a big all guns blazing, fully fledged campaign. We went out and we spoke to individuals, some local trusts and companies that are already known to us, and we managed to raise the rest of the money and therefore hit the 1 million target in basically an 8-month period. So we were really chuffed with that. We thought that was a fundraising success story in a really difficult time. V&A Dundee led on most of the fundraising. We did have some support from the other organisations, but we did most of the work. Really to try and, I mean, we're often accused of kind of being the big organisation coming in and hoovering up all the money. So we felt it was really important to be seen to be, yes, leading on fundraising, but making sure that our colleagues in the other organisations benefited. So the fund has been split equally. So each organisation received an equal split of the £1 million. The admin boring stuff was done by Dundee Museums Foundation, which was an arm's length charitable trust that was set up primarily to do the capital fundraising for the creation of V&A Dundee. But it has now got this sort of wider remit to support culture in the city. And my closing comment is really just to say that there is a strong desire now to continue working together. What that looks like, we don't know. Whether that'll just be around fundraising or other collective project work, we're not sure. But it's been an incredibly positive experience. Lots of, as I said, support locally. And that's all I really want to say at the moment. I'm more than happy to answer questions. And I've put my contact details here. If anyone wants to get in touch and have a sort of individual chat about how we did things, we'd be really happy to share our experience. And yeah, I'll leave it there just now and happy to answer questions in due course.
That's perfect. Thank you for that, Barry. And echoing what Barry just said, if any questions for Barry or any of the speakers, if you just pop them in the chat with your name and organisation, we will have a Q&A session at the end. Now, I think if I hand over to Simon and Nick from the Tank Museum.
Yeah, sure. Hello. Nick? You're muted still. Classic.
There you go. How many times have you had to say that over the last year, Simon, eh?
It's painful, isn't it? Absolutely painful.
Right, well, thank you very much, everyone. My name's Nick Wyness. I'm the head of marketing at the Tank Museum, and the person who unmuted me is...
My name's Simon Prager. I'm head of commercial operations at the Tank Museum, and we're here to talk to you about a few different projects we've been working on through the whole of COVID, and way before that, to be fair. I'm new to the museum, in inverted commas. I've only been here 18 months, and it's been a fun 18 months with the world on fire. Nick has been here a little while longer and is going to kick us off over what he's been doing since he's been here.
Well, thank you very much, Simon. So just to give you a little bit of an introduction about the Tank Museum. The Tank Museum is down in Dorset. If you haven't visited, I highly recommend it. We tell the story of tanks and the people that served in them, and we have what is widely regarded as the world's finest collection of tanks and armoured fighting vehicles. We're a registered charity, and we're also the Regimental Museum of the Royal Tank Regiment and the Corps Museum of the Royal Armoured Corps. so a military museum. And what really we're going to be talking to you about today is this really is all about how we've extracted value from our online communities. As Simon indicated, this isn't a project that was new for us for 2020 and the pandemic, but it was a project that really matured for us in 2020 during the pandemic. And as a result of that, the work that we put in before then and the way it grew during the pandemic actually saved jobs and actually helped create new ones as well. So overall, it is, for us at least, a good news story. So this is really all about how we moved from building our online audiences and moved from having a purely engagement strategy to a monetization strategy. Now, obviously, to monetize an online following, you actually need to have an online audience first. So we have, for some time now, been building our following on social media platforms. Facebook, obviously, we have some 350,000 followers on Facebook. But most importantly for us is our YouTube channel. So why do we use YouTube? Well, primarily because tanks are large and visually spectacular objects. You know, video is always the natural medium for us to gravitate towards in terms of helping us reach out to new audiences and sharing our enthusiasm with our subject matter, particularly because our vehicles move around as well, which means when it comes to creating content for social media platforms like YouTube, that gave us an advantage right away. And the whole objective of using those social media platforms was, it was all for us about being more famous. Like I said, we're a provincial regimental museum in the middle of a countryside. Everything we do in the online sphere is about making us more famous and reaching audiences, which for us would traditionally be hard to do. We don't have big budgets for advertising and that kind of thing. So when we talk about where we are today on YouTube in particular, we're very proud of our YouTube channel, and it's worked wonders for us. We have 360,000 subscribers, or slightly thereunder. We've achieved 60 million channel views, and the total watch time delivered by that channel is 8.9 million hours. So we have a very, very engaged audience. 8.9 million hours is almost 1,000 years, to put that into some kind of perspective. And this is a channel and an audience that we've built entirely ourselves. We haven't used consultants, we haven't used production companies or anything like that. This is just about us, homegrown content, telling stories in our own voice about the things that we're passionate about. And as a result of that, we've attracted an international following on our YouTube channel. To give you a breakdown of those stats, 28% of our viewing audience is actually based in the USA and just 22% in the UK, followed by 6% in Germany, 6% in Canada, 5% in Australia. There's always a number that we can't actually quantify because some people don't allow tracking and that kind of thing. But it is a largely international audience. More people outside the UK were watching it than inside the UK. Now, when we started to grow this audience back in 2017, this success of growing these audiences actually led the trustees to ask a very valid and important question. And that was, if the whole point of doing a YouTube channel was to basically spread the word of the Tank Museum so we could get more visitors, what was the point, what was the value to us of a viewer in Arizona in the United States of America? And at that point for us, the penny completely dropped. We realized that if we didn't have a monetization strategy in place for our online content, it wasn't actually going to be sustainable, because the odds of somebody from Arizona, USA visiting us is actually quite remote. So as a result of that, we had to have a little look about what we were doing and why we were doing it. And basically, we came up with a monetization strategy, which was composed of 4 things. I basically looked at what other YouTubers were doing to make money and basically sustain their channel and actually make a living from it. And there were 4 things that they were doing. The first thing was they were earning money from ad revenue. The second was they were earning money from memberships. The third thing was they were making money from partnerships and sponsorships. And the fourth thing was online merchandise sales. And I'll just say a brief bit about the first 3 of those, and then my colleague Simon will tell us about our phenomenal success in our award-winning online shop. So in terms of ad revenue, what we found with that is, well, in 2020, we earned £31,000 from ad revenue. So for us, that's a completely passive income. And what's really interesting about ad revenue on YouTube is it all depends on how attractive your audience is. Now, just now I was saying how big our US audience is, comparison with the UK audience. It's interesting that where the USA delivered in 2020, 30% of our views, in 2020, they actually delivered 52% of our ad revenue, because the ad market on YouTube in the USA is far more developed as it is in the UK. UK viewers, 24%, delivering just 19% of that ad revenue. So that's an interesting statistic. The next thing is membership. So we set up an account with Patreon back in 2017. I don't know if many of you are familiar with Patreon, but Patreon is basically an online membership platform. And it's used by a whole range of YouTubers and content creators, whether they're podcasters, musicians, anyone who's putting stuff out online. And it's basically designed to help those people earn a living from the content they're creating, by people who appreciate that content giving monthly donations on this platform called Patreon. So we set that up in 2017. It's been growing steadily for us. In 2020, we actually earned £60,000 over the year from people's individual monthly pledges. I think we've got about 1,000 patrons contributing monthly. And because of the pandemic, because the appeals for support we were putting out during our lockdown content, patronage actually grew for us 61% from January to December of 2020. So again, a very useful platform. And again, I think we're quite unique in the museum world for actually attempting to use Patreon as a means of raising funds. And finally, our partnerships and sponsorships. We have been working quite closely for a number of years now with a video games company called wargaming.net, and they produce the free-to-play video game World of Tanks, which, as you can imagine, for us is ideal. They have built a massive international following of younger people who like tanks, like to play tanks in video games. So when it comes to an online partnership, there are very few things that I think could be more successful from our point of view. And that partnership really bore fruition for us in 2020 because, of course, the pandemic hit. We weren't able to do our biggest fundraising event of the year, which is called Tankfest. Happens at the end of every June. But with Wargaming's help, we were able to do an online event, which was basically, you can still see it now. I think it's achieved quite a lot of views. 300,000 views is probably about what it's hit recently. Worth watching. I'll be 2 hours of tank content, which you'll all seriously enjoy, I'm sure. But yeah, they were able to help us do this live streamed online tank event. And from that, we were able to raise £50,000 from World of Tanks players directly. And it also led to revenues of £20,000 in additional online sales. I'm going to shut up now, and I'm going to hand you over to Simon, who is our head of commercial. He's already introduced himself, sorry. But before I do, one of the points I really want to make clear to you all is that our online audience is very, very different to our on-site audience. And by taking that lesson very, very seriously, we've allowed ourselves to be successful. And just to give you some statistics as to what that actually means, if I can find them in my scribbled notes, our online audience is about 91% male, and that compares to about 54% of our on-site audience. And our online audience is, on average, considerably younger than our on-site audience as well. So those are all things which have been very important to us when it comes to tailoring our product and creating an online shopping experience. Sorry, Simon.
No worries at all. So, as I said, I've been here about 18 months and I joined just before the pandemic. And we did, as Nick has alluded to, we have an online shop already. And the online shop sold about 80 of the products that we sell in our museum shop. And our museum shop has about 8,000 different lines. And we had 80 online, and we had what I'd class as more as a gift shop online, which had our best products. And we were taking between 80 and 100,000 a year on those products, on those 80 products. Most of it was gift ticket sales. So you could buy a gift ticket for someone and they would get sent to you in the post. And that's how we did that. And then we got locked down for the first time. And we decided, well, the only way we can do anything is we have an audience who can still see us. So we kept doing YouTube videos. Our curator was doing YouTube videos in his garden. And what we started to do is pile more products onto the online shop. Because actually from the 8,000 products we had, we knew there was more that could sell. We've gone from 80,000 this year. We're going to finish on about 1.4 million online on the online shop, and that's coupled with that's coupled with a...
Sorry? We've just lost Simon there, I think. Or he's
You want-
frozen.
Yeah, I can't see anything. Should we go on to Abby's and then we'll come back to Simon when he's hopefully back online? Do you think? Yeah.
Yeah.
Abby, are you happy to step in?
Yeah, absolutely. Right, I will share my screen. I do. Oh, Simon's back. Do you want to carry on?
I think that's obviously fate saying they don't want me to talk.
I feel like I just jumped straight in there.
No, apologies. I don't really know what happened there. The Wi-Fi kicked me out. I do apologise. So I will try and pick up where I was. So from the £80,000, this year we're going to be at £1.4 million online. And that goes with around £1 million on site sales in our shop. So we have more than doubled the sales, and actually most of that is a bigger proportion is now coming from online. We've done it by really looking at four things, because four things needed to change: the product, the process, the people, and the promotion. Now Nick has talked a lot about the promotion and how we were doing that, and we've also done Facebook products of the day. We've used Google Shopping to sell other things as well. But actually the product and our way of looking at product was the most important thing we've now started looking at. So we have the simple goal of we want to be the iwantoneofthose.com of the military world. Tanks first, obviously, military second, and then other stuff we can also sell. We are creating more and more unique product. So I have some Christmas socks here that just happened to turn up this morning. Our Christmas jumpers last year netted us about £60,000, and we sold out by Black Friday. So that's really good. Key to the product part though is price. So just because we are creating unique product doesn't necessarily mean we can be expensive. So a cup with a tank on is still a cup. A Christmas jumper with a tank on is still a Christmas jumper. If the product is not reasonably priced, it's not going to sell anyway. So we can do as much as we like with it. We can market it to high heaven, but if it's out of kilter with what it should be, it won't work. Our best example has just come in today. So this is Pantherfeeble. This is a tank manual from the German World War II Panther vehicle. This is the first UK production, or anywhere in the world production, of an English version. It is done to the same size, it's done in the same way, with exactly the same information that is in there, just in English. It's beautiful. We're selling it for £35. We crowdfunded this because we were not sure how many we were going to do. We wanted to sell 200 in a month to be able to finance the operation. We sold 1,100 in 24 hours, which was just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. The second thing we then had to look at was process. So if I give you a statistic of, in 2019, we had 3,792 orders in the year. In the last 30 days, we've had 3,800 orders. So we're basically doing what we did in a year, in a month. And so because of that, we've had to change our process. We were taking parcels once they were packed up to the post office and posting them off. We're not doing that anymore. We've got Royal Mail, UPS and DHL picking up from us each day. We've then had to look at people. So people was really important. Buying our product was just something someone did when they had time. We've now got a permanent buyer on the team who is looking at product. And we have an evening team in place to be able to do the online shop, because we can't do it during the day. So we have a team from 3 o'clock to 11 o'clock at night, working from Sunday to Thursday, because they've got nearly 4,000 orders to do a month. And then promotion, as Nick said, using Facebook product of the day, using YouTube videos, using Google Shopping. One of our best-selling products this month has been a children's book called Owl Babies, which has sod all to do with tanks or to do with museums, frankly. We got it at a good price. We have put it on Google Shopping, and we have sold 104 copies in the last 12 days. So I think this whole product, tanks first, military second, we can sell other stuff because we have started to get good at selling other stuff as well. As I say, we're going to be 1.4 million this year. We know there is still growth in that, and actually we think we could still get close to 2.5 million. It's just about how we grow and what process, what product, and what people have to change to be able to make that growth. So that's it for me, and apologies I skipped out in the middle.
So yes, thank you all very much. Obviously, if you've got any questions, we'll be happy to kick those around at the end. I hope that was interesting.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Simon. It definitely was interesting, I can promise you that. And Abi, to finish things off.
Hello, everyone. I do apologise. Well, I've been having screen issues, IT issues myself. So fingers crossed we will be okay. Let me just share my screen with you. See, but can you see that? Is that all working?
Yeah, we can see that, Abi.
Super. Sorry, it was causing me all issues. So good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Abi Betteridge. I'm the individual giving manager at the RAF Museum. So I'm here to talk to you about one of the initiatives that we launched during the pandemic, which is Adopt an Artifact. So just a bit of information for you, for those of you that don't know about the RAF Museum. So we have two sites. We have one in London and one in Cosford in the West Midlands. And we also have a reserve collection in Stafford. So my role is based at Cosford, or technically my spare room, although I am on site today. And I'm responsible, though, for individual giving at both Cosford and London. So we're a national museum, we're a registered charity, and our purpose is to share the story of the Royal Air Force. So we have a collection of over 1.3 million items, which span over a century of RAF history. But most importantly for this session, we are a free museum which relies on our self-generated income, whether that's through donations on site, online, through our car parking, our cafes, our shops, or our public and corporate events. And we get income from our almost 1 million visitors that we receive a year. So I joined the development team in January 2020, which is possibly the worst time to join a fundraising team. So my role also was completely new to the museum. So we'd never had an individual giving manager in post. Previously, the individual giving had been kind of limited to people making donations whilst they were on site. So I was really excited that I would get to be able to launch a completely new programme. And we had some really exciting things that were going to come up, which were very face-to-face and pandemic friendly. So we had challenge events and air shows, and yeah, how the coming months changed. So like everyone here, March 2020 was especially hard. So we obviously, I'd only just joined the role, which made things very difficult. So in the following weeks, we sat down as a team and we looked at ways that we could start working on virtual fundraising. By the end of April 2020, we had come up with the idea of doing Adopt an Artifact. And the project grew from that initial idea in April to launching it in July, so less than 10 weeks, which gave myself and my team a lot of sleepless nights. We're about to celebrate the 1-year birthday on Saturday. So we pitched the idea of Adopt an Artifact as a unique opportunity to be part of the RAF story, whilst also raising funds for the museum whilst we were closed. We developed the programme to be 100% digital because we were aware that we had no idea when the museum was likely to reopen. So we chose a range of items from our collection, so our most iconic, but we also chose some weird and wonderful items. So our list of over 50 items include everything from what you would expect, lapel badges, uniform, to our lucky mascots. And then we've also got some of our weird and wonderful items such as powdered eggs, toilet fluid, and we've even got a beer mat. So there really is something for everyone. So we created the pages within our existing website, and then we launched, like I said, in July. So we've split the adoptions into 3 tiers, which meant that we had different price points. And it also meant that the project could span across the 3 areas of the team. So it meant that my colleagues in corporate and high net worth individuals could also tailor adoptions to suit their audiences. So adoptions start from just £25, and they range all the way up to tens of thousands if people are adopting one of our aircraft. So items in our standard tier are able to be adopted by lots of different people, whereas those in our exclusive and enhanced tier can only be adopted by either one individual or one company. So the screenshots that you can see, there's a section on the left of our website, and then the 2 sort of zoomed in. That's the list of items that we've got. And when you clicked on each of the objects, you find out a bit more about the object. So we worked really hard with our collections team to make sure that we could sort of change the copy slightly that we would normally use on our website to be a bit more engaging, as we thought that Adopt an Artifact would kind of bring us a slightly different audience. So before the pandemic, our collections team were working on our online collections database, Collections Online, and this meant that we were able to tie this into the launch of Adopt an Artifact. And this meant we could direct people to the Collections Online database to delve more into the stories and information on each of their adoptions. But it also meant that we were able to allow people to make a personalised dedication along with their adoption, and people could view those when visiting Collections Online. Due to the lockdown, none of our staff, obviously, during this period were able to go to site. So we had to choose our items based on what was already going on to Collections Online in phase 1. But it was amazing to be able to link those 2 projects together. And whilst we only had a few hundred items to choose from, it was better than over the million. So unlike most museum adoption programs that run, we weren't tying this to a capital project where we had a sort of a tailored theme that we needed to follow. So it has meant that we were let loose a bit more, and the objects that we have got to adopt completely vary, as I said before. So in addition to having your name on the museum website and also on Collections Online, all adoptees also receive a digital image of their adoption and also a digital certificate. I've included some of those for you to see. On this next screen, there's some sample dedications that I wanted to share with you. So we've had a large number of adoptions which are extremely moving, including a few that have been made for serving members of their family that served in the RAF. We've had a large number of people also that made adoptions in the very early days, thanking our staff and volunteers for keeping going during the closure and also in lieu of a visit. And lastly on there, we've also received some rather amusing ones. The last one's my absolute favourite. A lady adopted the aircraft Elsinore toilet fluid for her dad as a thank you for always changing the caravan toilet. So we have processed all our adoptions through a donation platform called Things, and this allowed us to develop a bespoke donation page for each of the objects. So each of the objects has a page that you land on, and it'll have an image of the item, and then you can adopt. Things also specialise in QR and NFC technology. So I was really keen to try and utilise the platform and future-proof Adopt an Artifact for when one day we hopefully could reopen the museum. With the whole project being designed to be purely digital, we were confident that we could be resilient to any future impacts of the pandemic. But it's also opened us up to new opportunities now we have reopened. So using the QR and NFC technology, we're developing ways for our visitors, when now they're back on site, to be able to engage with our adoption items and use their phones whilst in the museum. So you'll be able to scan an item or a code and see who has adopted that item, read their dedications, and also adopt there and then with your phone. So we've developed Adopt an Artifact to bring us in a sustainable and resilient income during whilst the museum was closed. We knew it wasn't going to cover our £3 million loss in self-generated income, but we were hoping that it would be a way that our visitors could still continue to engage with us and our collections and our stories, and also continue to support us through their donations. In the first year of Adopt an Artifact, we've had over 200 people who have helped us raise over £70,000. The average adoption value, minus those that we've had from our corporates and high net worth, is £60, which is far higher than we would see for someone making a standalone donation on our website or on site. We've had 2 major corporate adoptions through Chelsea Football Club and also Mars Wrigley. And we've seen that 10% of our adoptions have been made in memory, and 49% of those have been made with a gift. These are significantly higher than we anticipated, and it's meant that it's opened us up to more options going forward. During the launch of Adopt an Artifact, the new web pages for the site accounted for over 30% of all traffic to our museum website. And I thought it'd be interesting to share with you the most popular adoptions, and I've got some photos of those for you. So Amy Johnson, the fabric doll on the left, who divides opinion on Facebook as to whether she's adorable or slightly scary looking. But Amy was the first female pilot to fly solo from England to Australia in 1930. And then in the middle, you have a set of playing cards, which had hidden maps hidden inside. So these were cards used by RAF prisoners of war in Germany during the Second World War to smuggle in the maps into prison camps. And lastly, our favourite on the right is Percy the Penguin. So Percy is one of our lucky charms, and many bomber command aircrew would carry these during flights as a lucky charm to protect them from many of the hazards. So what's coming next? We're in the midst of launching 5 new objects for the first anniversary, which include a toothbrush and a dog lead. We have got our Christmas campaign launching in November, which includes a Christmas gift box with items that were sent to serving personnel in Iraq in 2004. And we have, now we've reopened, we've started working on some more physical items to be added, especially as we've seen that the large number of people are adding adoptions for gifts. So we are stocking physical gift cards to be stocked in the shops, which will have a value on them, but people can redeem off an adoption of their choice. We're also looking at tying in with our retail team to offer more gifts that they can add to adoption, which are then posted out to their gift recipient. We trialled it at Christmas and we added 3 products from our Christmas range, which people could choose from, and we had over 60% uptake on those. So it's something that we're going to explore again. It's also a huge joint museum effort. We work with lots of different teams on this project, and we're continuing to work with different teams. We're developing an access and learning offer for our schools. So whilst the schools are still slow coming back to us, we are still getting a lot of people joining us with our virtual workshops. So we're going to tailor adoptions, which means that a school can fundraise throughout the year and they can adopt something, which then they can either come and see when they visit us on site, or we can share with them on their virtual workshops. And lastly, as mentioned, I'm going to continue to work on ways that we can ensure that Adopt an Artifact not only makes us sense digitally, but also physically now that we've reopened. So that was a really quick whistle tour of Adopt an Artifact. But if anyone wants to have a look on the website, if you go to rafmuseum.org and click on the top, you'll see the link to Adopt an Artifact, and my details are there if anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Abi. That's brilliant. We've got a really quick follow-up question to your presentation, actually, in the chat from Vicky at the National Justice Museum, who just wanted to know how many artifacts can people choose from in total?
So we started with 50 when we first launched, and we're now up to 62. I'm about to add 5 on, but I'm going to swap a few out.
Thank you for that. And thank you, Vicky, for that question. One question I'd like to put to all of you, you've all sort of covered it, but I wondered if maybe we could sort of delve into this a little bit deeper, is how you're going to look to be sustaining these initiatives going forward and maintaining money coming in. I think in terms of, obviously, with the Tank Museum, obviously, Nick, you talked about the Patreon account, and I was wondering how you make sure you keep people subscribing every month. How do you have to sort of freshen up the content constantly and new ways of doing that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So because we like I say, we've been running Patreon now for a few years, and it's just been kind of slowly growing and growing and growing. But like any membership scheme, there's going to be a degree of churn. And so the best way to keep growing is, we reference our Patreon in pretty much all of the content we put out. So every YouTube video we put out, there'll be a plea to support us on Patreon, both at the beginning, both at the end. So recruitment is really, really important. And of course, like any membership scheme, recruitment is just as important as retention. So we do a lot of activities in order to try and keep our patrons sort of interested and retained. So we offer them a range of benefits, for example. That's one of the beauties of Patreon, is it allows people to join the scheme at different tiers, and those tiers have different benefits associated with them. And then those benefits will include things like discounts in the shop, autographs from our curator. That's right, I said autographs from a curator. Who'd have thought, eh? And different things like that, discounted tickets and that sort of thing. So if people are really engaged in the museum, if they're only going to support us on Patreon if they're really engaged in the museum and really engaged in what we're doing. We're also communicating quite liberally as well with what that money is being used for. So it's not just kind of going into a black hole. We're actively supporting an apprenticeship in our workshop using the income from Patreon, and we're also supporting an intern position in our media production team. So one of the people who helps us put out and deliver this Patreon content is actually, her post is being funded by people's donations on Patreon. And actually that kind of human contact with their activity, they always write a monthly blog on what they've been up to for our patrons. That kind of human story that's associated with our Patreon really helps keep people engaged, we think.
Thank you for that. And Simon, is that the same in terms of the shop, that you have to keep sort of freshening up, keeping it agile with the things you stock?
Yeah, so, if we hadn't added any new products, I talked about the fact we didn't have everything online, but actually there came a point where we put everything good online. If we hadn't have bought anything new, if we hadn't created any more new unique product, at some point everybody's going to have that product that they wanted. So we end up with new Merry Christmas wrapping paper that's just coming in. It's got little plates and tanks on and things like that, and keeping something fresh. It's a bit like going onto the high street. You always, if you enjoy shopping, I don't. I worked on the high street for a long time. I don't enjoy shopping, but actually, if you do enjoy shopping, you want to go there. You want to find something new. The nice thing about us is, hopefully, you won't find this kind of product anywhere else. So we've just got to keep churning that unique stuff out, and the unique is what brings people in, and then we can keep selling them other things as well. I suppose the only other point I'd make is actually our shop sales are improving as well as our online shop. So obviously our shop was shut for 5.5 months like everybody else. Actually, because we've been buying better product, the shop sales are going up as well, because while the two audiences are different, we've got a lot of children in over the summer. And they like the same kind of wrapping paper for birthdays and things that they do with Christmas. So it doesn't matter. So I think it's just about ensuring you carry on and you don't just say, yeah, we've done that, that's great, because I don't think for the shop you'd ever be at that point.
Thank you for that. And Abi, in terms of the Adopt an Artifact, is that the same as regards you're just going to constantly update? I know you said you've got some new things on for the anniversary. But I also wondered, how long does the adoption last? Did they adopt it in perpetuity, or do they have to keep updating that?
So it depends on the adoption. So our standard ones are 12 months. So the ones that range from £25 to 100 are 12 months. So I think our thing now is we've been so focused on how do we engage with people when we're closed, that actually now we're having to pivot back to how do we fundraise and engage with people through Adopt an Artifact. Now our doors are opened. So similar to what Nick said, it's those personal things. So we've started working now. Obviously, our teams are back on site more often, although our back of house staff are still working from home. We're working with the collections team to try and draw out some stories so that we can start sharing stories of the conservation, so we can kind of entice people to adopt for a different reason. Because I think that whilst we were closed and whilst we could talk about the fact that we needed people's help to continue to help us keep flying as we used, you know, it was very emotive and people wanted to support the museum. And whether that was through Adopt an Artifact, or it was through a donation, or it was through joining one of our giving circles, it's now that I feel like this is when we need to switch our focus to life is becoming more normal, and for people feeling they don't need to necessarily support in the same way. So that's why we're working on ways to sort of use Adopt an Artifact, but in the hangars and whilst people are visiting for us.
Thank you for that. And on the subject of sustaining this sort of fundraising, Barry, obviously the Cultural Recovery Fund was in response to the pandemic. Do you foresee you'll do another round? Do you think it's limited on how many times you can go back to people in Dundee, obviously seeking support?
I think it would be difficult to go back and do another sort of pandemic related appeal. I think that's, you know, we've done that. I did say in the chat that you know, we contacted a relatively modest number of people. I mean, I think we only contacted sort of 25 to 30 donors that we already knew, and we got about 15 or 16 of them saying yes. So it's not impossible that we would think about doing some sort of public campaign. It's just a tricky one to know. I mean, I mentioned that you know, it's 5 organisations. V&A Dundee did the majority of the work. I think initially colleagues in some of the other organisations were sceptical as to why we would want to do this, and but we've got to a point now where they thought, you know, well, you know, this is fantastic, and we really do want to continue doing something. What that's going to look like, I just don't know. I think there's a desire amongst some of the other organisations who have their own particularly capital ambitions in terms of redeveloping sites and whatever else, to make use of the mechanism that we've put in place to do the Cultural Recovery Fund and having that exist on its own. But that's going to require sort of its own resourcing. I can't go on forever. You know, I'm employed by V&A Dundee, and I've got targets in terms of money that I've got to raise for V&A Dundee, and I can't go on forever. Much as I love helping the other organisations, I can't go on forever doing that. So we need to come to a slightly more equitable way of carving up the work, I guess. But yeah, there is a big desire to continue. Now that we've got it off the ground and got past the initial scepticism, there is a desire to continue working together. I'm not quite sure what that's going to look like.
Thank you for that. And obviously, as I've said before, oh, is it Reg? Have you got a question?
Yes, David, I have. Firstly, can I say thank you to all the presenters. This has been fascinating. You all guys and girls are years ahead of me. I chair a small group of trustees who want to open an insurance museum in the heart of the insurance district in EC3 London, round about the Lloyd's building. And before the pandemic, we were identifying a few premises that we might open a physical museum. I mean, there's stuff all over the country in archives and fascinating stuff, and none of us would exist without insurance. So it should be an interesting topic. But since the lockdown, we've been biding our time, wondering how many people are going to come back to the city, what's the footfall going to be like, what are the premises going to be available, and so on. So we've concentrated on trying to the idea of developing a virtual museum, and we're working at the moment opening a fire gallery online as a virtual museum, and then we're going to move on to other classes of business. But what 5 most important pieces of advice would the experts give me?
I don't know who fancies taking that one first.
I'm not sure I can come up with 5.
One will do.
Yeah, well, I'll see. I mean, I'll waffle on for a bit and see how many you can pick out. I think the whole idea of a virtual museum. I mean, the research that we're getting in, you know, we're doing a lot of our own research, and we're part of wider Visit Scotland research about, you know, how people feel about going back out and doing things again. And it changes every time you ask the question. So 6 months ago, I think there was a real split. It was 50-50 split between people who were desperate to get back out doing physical things and 50% of people who were really anxious about it. I think and it changed, and Dundee's got a particular problem at the moment in that last week we've dropped down to number 2, but we were the COVID hotspot of Europe last week. So the possibility of people coming to Dundee was less likely. I think as time goes on, more and more people will be desperate to get back doing physical things. So I wouldn't lose sight. My advice is don't lose sight of what you do physically. I think we've all, and I mean, colleagues can comment, we've all had to pivot to digital in some way in terms of our, you know, how we show off our objects. But there is always going to be a desire for people to see the real thing in the flesh. And it's having that mix. As a fundraiser, what I would say to you is make sure you don't stop fundraising just because people aren't visiting or whatever. You've got an opportunity to sort of go out and, yeah, absolutely identify the things that you want to show in the museum, but this is a really good opportunity to start making those relationships with people who will hopefully become your donors and will help you create whatever it is that you want to create. So that's possibly 2. I'll shut up now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just to we have already got relationships. All the trade associations are supporting us. The City of London Corporation is supporting us, and so on. We are in negotiations with a developer in the City of London for a museum 8 to 10 years hence on his 5th gallery with its own personal exit, lift and escalators. It all depends upon the City Corporation's planning consent and things like that. But we do intend to go physical in the long run. Let's
just to interject, sorry, Reg. The previous session we ran today called the Digital Dilemma. I don't know if you saw that.
I registered for it, but I didn't get the link.
Oh, sorry about that. There will be a copy of that will be uploaded in a couple of weeks, and I think you'll probably find it quite interesting to see what some of the speakers said in that session.
Okay.
Thank you very much. It's very nice to get a question delivered in person as well, rather than on the chat. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. The one other question I just thought if I could squeeze in before we run out of time for the panel was about sort of cultivating corporate partners and sponsors, because I know obviously Barry, you talked about DC Thompson doing the match funding, and Abi, you said about Chelsea Football Club and Mars Wrigley getting involved with the corporate side of the thing. How is a museum of any different sort? How do you go about starting those sort of relationships?
I think Abi's speaking, but is on mute.
Oh, it's like a morning webinar. Sorry, I hear that every morning. Someone's on mute. It's normally not me. I normally have a post-it note saying take myself off mute. Yeah, so our Chelsea Football Club relationship with Adopt an Artifact came through from another project. The kind of corporate relationships come through one of my colleagues, but we run a project called Jewish Hidden Heroes, and it was a relationship through there. So I think they would definitely say that the cultivation of relationships has been particularly hard during the pandemic for us. But we reached out to those corporates that we had been engaging with and before the pandemic and continuing, and it kind of felt like there was a way that they could support and still have their name and kind of tick those boxes that they wanted. But it was very much those two corporates were ones that we already were working with in projects. That necessarily wasn't that they were donating at the time, but we were working with them on other projects. So yeah, I know that it has been particularly difficult for our corporate colleagues during the pandemic. But I think having something like Adopt an Artifact, whether they then don't potentially support that project, it's a way of going into corporates with something they might be interested in. So we've done a lot of work around the West Midlands with companies that were part of the Spitfire Fund that were producing parts for the Spitfire, and there's always those little links that you can find to companies that then might want to support with something with that.
Yeah,
thank you, Barry.
David, if I could just add, I mean, we've actually had a good year for corporates, but it's not, I mean, I have to be honest, it's not, we've not gone out to seek them. They've sought us out, which is really unusual. But there were two in particular. We did a deal with the Dalmore, which is a very high-end Scotch whisky, and that is around designing packaging. So the architect of our building, Kengo Kuma, is designing, and he's just done the Tokyo Olympic Stadium as well, is designing a very high-end packaging for an exclusive whisky that will retail at about £500,000 quid. So it's really, it's really big money. I mean, we're not, I can assure you, we're not getting anywhere near that. But that's been good. But they've sought us out because of our sort of profile in terms of design. And we did another deal with a company called the Energy Check, who are essentially like a price comparison website, but more for institutions rather than individuals. And they sought us out because they'd done a previous deal with the Design Museum in London, and that had worked quite well for them in terms of promoting their business. So, but I think they're quite unusual. I think the corporate market is really difficult, and on the more local corporates that we had brokered ourselves some time ago, we lost a couple of them just because they were losing staff and they couldn't justify spending money on sponsorship when they were having to make people redundant. So it's a really, really tricky market, I think, at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know, Nick or Simon, obviously from a museum with quite a niche focus, have you got anything to share on this sort of topic of partnership building?
We don't have a huge sort of track record of corporate relationships. We just have this one really important partnership with the video games producer Wargaming.net, which has come about completely sort of fortuitously for us. But it is, it's transactional. What they get out of it is they have a space where they can kind of physically connect with their players, because of course, being an online games company, I mean, you still need to have that. And they'll sort of do events here in the same way that they will at video game fairs and that kind of thing. But for us, what we get out of it, I mean, obviously there is cash involved, but actually for us, it's the access to their audience, which has proved to be more valuable than any kind of financial sort of benefit that they can give us, because they have a worldwide community, and it's one which is ideal for us. It's the people who play the game are exactly the kind of people we want to be talking to. So it's not just about money, I suppose, is the point to make about that relationship.
Mm-hmm. The only other thing we have had some success with, and it is slightly different, but actually teaming with different organisations to create product with them. So we Kobe, who are a Polish company who create Lego type brick tanks and things like that, because Lego are anti-war. We are now in a 5-year deal with them, producing our vehicles, which once again gets our name out there, Tank Museum on the box. Will be sold to other people as well, and generally is really good at working with them, and that's not about a money thing for us. It's just about getting our name out there. Lovely, thank you, Matilda too. That's just about getting our name out there.
Thank you very much for that, and I appreciated your audition then, Nick, for QVC. That was very impressive. I think we have now just run out of time on our hour. So as I said to Reg earlier, the session will be available as a recording in a couple of weeks. So anyone who wants to watch this or any other session back can do so at the start of August. But all that remains to say is thank you so much to Abi, Barry, Nick and Simon for joining us. It's been really great. As with most of our talks, it could have gone on a lot longer than an hour. I'm sorry that we've been packed into this schedule. But thank you so much for your time, and thank you everyone for joining us. And I hope you can join us for the rest of the sessions this afternoon.